Good morning. Yes, it's just before midday here, so good evening to anybody in Australia. This will be the first of two, maybe three parts of looking at a review of the book Blind Injustice by Mark Godsey. You've probably heard both myself and the good doctor talk about this particular book. Oh yes, I have got it here with me. I'm getting through it very rapidly now. It's hi Jazz, very, very interesting book. And rather than sort of quote loads of bits from it, I found this excellent review of the book, a document on the internet. So have a read through this, and this will give a bit more of an insight into, what the book is about, and some of the stuff that's of great interest that's presented in the book. Hi Alice, as we know, Mark Godsey is a former prosecutor, a prosecutor's prosecutor, no less, a very aggressive prosecutor, one that won various tributes all the way up the food chain of the legal system, and very much at one time viewed defendants who were pleading innocent as the enemy, until he had to take over when he became a professor at a university. The university had an innocence project, and the professor that was running the innocence project was away for a year, and so as part of his job he had to assist the students in the innocence project, but came to it from the point of view that they're well-meaning, naive, misguided students, but then as he delved into what they were looking at, began to realize that he had been just as bad as a prosecutor as the people that they were coming up against. Anyway, let's delve straight into what I'm talking about. So here we go. Let's pop this up. And this one here, and hopefully that will all work as it should do. In fact, I can go a little bit bigger, I think. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Right. Okay. So this is Blinded by the Light, a review of Mark Godsey's Blind Injustice by George C. Thomas III. Mark Godsey, Blind Injustice, a former prosecutor, exposes the psychology and politics of wrongful convictions. University of California Press, 2017. Quote, "Mama always told me not to look into the sights of the sun. Whoa, but Mama, that's where the fun is." Okay, stop me if you've heard this one. Police interrogators are not able to tell whether a suspect is lying or telling the truth by his demeanor and tone of voice. Interesting, last night I watched for the first time all the way through the Netflix documentary about Amanda Knox. And of course, the journalist, Nick Pizza, what a complete and utter idiot, suggesting that, this wasn't trial by media, and that if he didn't put in these salacious headlines, then his competitors would, as if that's some sort of an excuse for what he did. Anyway, we're digressing. Certainly you have the prosecutor. I thought the prosecutor in Amanda Knox's case was was quite fair at the end when he said, if Amanda Knox is innocent, then, I hope that she can recover from the horror of 6 years of being locked away in prison. And if she's not innocent, then, we all must face the ultimate trial at the end of our days. So, he was resigned to the fact that I think really he was saying he doesn't really know. And I think if you've had, guilty, not guilty, guilty again, not guilty, there's a problem there, isn't there? And we don't convict people on the chance that they might be. Well, we shouldn't. Anyway, sorry, as I say, we are digressing. Studies show that the ability of police to be a human lie detector is little better than flipping a coin. It's exactly the same, in fact. Eyewitness identifications are often wrong. Doesn't Penny Bernstein know that now? We do not know how often, but we do know that of the 350 or so cases exonerated by DNA that appear on the Cardozo Innocence Project website, over 70% included an identification of a suspect who turned out to be factually innocent. Thus, cases of assault, robbery, and rape that depend crucially on eyewitness identification are inherently suspect. Almost all forensic science, CSI be damned, is at best an educated guess. Even fingerprints are, in cases at the margin, not as scientific as examiners claim. DNA testing of a sufficient sample that is not contaminated by more than one person's DNA is an exception. But new evidence suggests that methods for testing tiny or mixed samples can produce inaccurate results that free the guilty and convict the innocent. So that first quote, Bruce Springsteen. Not a great fan of Bruce Springsteen, I must admit, but that's a personal thing, nothing to do with his music. Okay, many years ago, when I was very, very young, a young lady who I liked very, very much lent me Bruce Springsteen's Darkness on the Edge of Town, and promptly stood me up on a date. I just took a record back, and I was most upset. Anyway, remember that one. Anyway, so let's carry on. When faced with DNA evidence that irrefutably establishes the innocence of a prisoner, some prosecutors concoct bizarre stories that prove they did not convict an innocent defender. One former prosecutor told a student when she mentioned my wrongful conviction course, quote, "There are no wrongful convictions." The National Registry of Exonerations has over 2,000 heartbreaking stories of innocent men and women who have spent years and sometimes decades behind bars. A few have languished on death row. One of my, quote, favorite stories is the case of Jerry Lee Jenkins, who was convicted of rape in 1987 on 2 shaky pieces of evidence. Because the rapist wore a stocking over his face, the victim only saw the bottom of his face when he pulled off the stocking to kiss her. She testified in court, "I cannot say that I can positively identify him." An FBI serology expert said tests put Jenkins in 4% of the population that could have committed the rape. DNA testing was in its infancy in 1987. The decision even to prosecute Jenkins was questionable. The police had a theory that the rape for which Jenkins was arrested was committed by the same man who had raped in 1984. noting more than a dozen similarities in the two rapes. But blood tests excluded Jenkins in the 1984 case, given the substantial possibility that the same rapist committed both rapes, and he was not Jenkins, together with the weak eyewitness identification and the inability to narrow the pool below 4%, one wonders why the prosecutor brought the case against Jenkins. And, of course, 26 years later, authorities learnt that the 1986 rape was indeed committed by the 1984 rapist, who was not Jenkins. The jurors in the Jenkins case did not seem to give much weight to the requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The rape took place in a suburb of Washington, D.C. The victim's description was a white man wearing a plaid flannel shirt, jeans, and work boots. At a minimum, that description would fit tens of thousands of men in the District of Columbia area. 4% of tens of thousands would be in the hundreds, and the victim had never made a definite identification of Jenkins. In what universe is that proof beyond a reasonable doubt? But the jury convicted after 10 hours of deliberation. Around 10 years after he was convicted, Jenkins persuaded a court to order a DNA test, but the rape kit had been misplaced. Jenkins served another 15 years before the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project requested one more search for the test kit. The search of the sheriff's storage facility turned up a battered box that contained hairs from the victim's rape kit, hairs from the scene of the crime, and fingernail scrapings along with the victim's purse. The DNA test exonerated Jenkins, who, by then, had served 26 years for a crime he did not commit. Reading these stories produces disbelief and sorrow. How could the system fail so many so badly? And that, of course, is the subject of Mark Godsey's new book, Blind Injustice. There have been, over the past dozen or so years, several excellent books examining the failings of the American criminal legal system. A skeptic might wonder, what is there new to say about the problems that infect the system? But that skepticism melts almost instantly when one opens Godsey's book. Mark Godsey brings a unique perspective to bear on the problem of convicting the innocent. For years, he was one of the prosecutors who, he now sees, suffered from a too smug attitude about the ability of investigators and prosecutors to almost always get it right when deciding who to prosecute. He was, in his own words, a hard-nosed prosecutor. Now, when he got into law teaching in 2001, Godsey was assigned to be faculty supervisor of the Kentucky Innocence Project. He accepted the assignment reluctantly because he didn't believe that innocent people were sent to prison in this country. He saw his law students who were striving to prove innocence as naive, as a bunch of gullible, bleeding heart law students. His first case involved eyewitness testimony of the rape victim, who was certain that the man she identified was the man who raped her. Godsey was also certain that the man they represented was guilty. So, he doesn't believe the law students who were saying that, could be innocent. In fact, I knew it, he writes in his book, but new DNA testing techniques proved conclusively that the semen collected from the victim did not match the man who had served 13 years for a crime he did not commit. Next year, he moved to the University of Cincinnati College of Law, where he helped found the Ohio Innocence Project, which he still runs. Over the years, the project has investigated thousands of cases of Ohio inmates claiming innocence. Now, the investigations confirmed the guilt of many, but led to the exoneration so far of 25 men and women on grounds of innocence. Godsey describes his book as a kind of confessional and memoir, which, because of my personal journey, provides a behind-the-scenes look at the psychological and political factors that cause wrongful convictions in a way that no book previously has. The book is the story of one person's evolution, a story of my enlightenment and discovery. He is Saul on the road to Damascus, who, according to the New Testament, was called by God to fight for Jesus rather than persecute him. And, like Saul, Godsey brings passion, energy, and determination to the new task at hand. In an obscure double jeopardy case for the United States Supreme Court, Justice Holmes began his analysis. It is a short point. He then proceeded to decide two cases, one of which he describes as delicate, in a page and one half. I could write a similarly short book review. Godsey's book is splendid. Everyone who cares the least bit about justice must read it. Parts will make you shake your head in amazement. Parts will give you a sense of elation, and parts will make you cry. All of that is true, but permit me to fill in a few details. The structure of the book is to take stories, mostly from his innocence work, but some from his experiences as a federal prosecutor, to illustrate 6 broad themes, roughly the 7 deadly sins: blind denial, blind ambition, blind bias, blind memory, blind intuition, and blind tunnel vision. It all adds up, of course, to blind injustice. 1. Blind denial. This chapter, yes, even better. This chapter is a moving, insightful account of the levels of extreme psychological denial to which prosecutors and police often succumb to avoid admitting that they convicted an innocent person. No better example exists than the case of Clarence Elkins, who was convicted of raping and murdering his mother-in-law and assaulting and raping his 6-year-old niece in 1988. The entire case was based on the testimony of the niece, who initially told police that the attacker, quote, looked like her uncle, but at trial testified it was her uncle, and this despite seeing the attacker only for a few seconds in the dark. The crime scene was awash in blood, but police found no blood on Elkins or any evidence that he had disposed of his bloody clothes. Elkins had a solid alibi. The jury convicted. In 2005, more sophisticated DNA tests revealed that the semen inside the mother-in-law and in the skin cells on the niece's underwear was that of the same male, but that man was not Elkins. Godsey expected the state to agree to vacate Elkins' convictions and look for the real killer rapist. Instead, the prosecutor somewhat similar to Kratz, concocted fanciful explanations for how another man's DNA was inside the murder victim and on the underwear of the niece. Part of the story was that the mother-in-law had shaken hands that day with a man and had gotten his DNA on her hands, and then had come home and masturbated. Of course, this did not explain the DNA of the same man on the underwear of the niece. As outrageously implausible as this story was, the judge denied the motion to free Elkins. As Godsey puts it, the judge was in denial too, and only a stroke of luck allowed the Ohio Innocence Project to develop even stronger evidence that another man was guilty, even with conclusive evidence that another man was the murderer and rapist. It took the intervention of the Ohio Attorney General before the prosecutors capitulated and agreed to exonerate Elkins. There are other stories of denial, but the Elkins case is the best, most bizarre, unbelievable story of denial that I have ever read. Blind ambition. Chief state prosecutors in each county or district are elected in all but 3 states. Connecticut, New Jersey, and Alaska are the exceptions. Trial judges in all but 11 states are elected. Many prosecutors want to become judges or politicians, and that's certainly the case with a lot of the prosecutors we've come across. Thinking Jim Harding became a judge, Brad Schimmel is now a judge, Ken Kratz wanted to run for some political position. Thank goodness he never got there. Chris Christie, former United States Attorney and now former Governor of New Jersey, is but one example of the latter. Pretty much all judges want to be re-elected until they choose to retire or go into politics. Certainly the case of Willis. During Steve's second trial, Willis was up for re-election shortly after the trial. Or was it actually during the trial? I can't quite remember. One can find many examples of judges who lost elections because they were perceived as being soft on crime. I doubt that a judge has ever lost an election because she was too hard on those charged with or convicted of a crime. In my home state of Tennessee, Justice Penny White voted with the 3-2 majority to vacate the death sentence in State versus Odom because the rape of the elderly victim did not cause the murder to be, quote, especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel in that it involved torture or serious physical abuse beyond that necessary to produce death. In her 1996 retention election, she was targeted by various conservative and victims' rights groups, as well as the Tennessee governor and both of Tennessee's United States senators. She lost. Chief Justice Rose Bird of the California Supreme Court is perhaps the best known example of judges defeated because they were perceived as soft on crime. As Godsey puts it, fear of losing elections naturally causes judges to flex their pro-prosecution muscles. Justice Sotomayor quoted an elected judge on the problem of judges considering voter reaction to their decisions. Let's face it, we're human beings. Former Chief Judge of the Alabama Supreme Court, Sue Bell Cobb, put it this way: Judges would have to be saints to ignore the political reality, and judges aren't saints. Part of the political reality for judges facing election is fundraising. Ohio Supreme Court Justice Paul Pfeiffer told the New York Times, "I have never felt so much like a hooker by the bus station in any race I've ever been in, as I did in a judicial race." To bring this global concern down to a retail level, recall the judge who denied the motion to free Elkins based on a fanciful speculation about the murder victim masturbating with another man's DNA on her hands. A second example is the case of Chris Bennett, who was found in the driver's seat with his dead friend on the floorboard. Based only on this evidence and the blood alcohol test, the state convicted Bennett of aggravated vehicle homicide. It's vehicular. I'll get it in a minute. Vehicular. Bennett's memory was impaired by his injuries, but in prison he began to remember that he was in the passenger's seat when the crash happened, and later crawled into the driver's seat to try to help his friend. The prosecution had not tested the windshield to see whose blood was present on which part. Godsey's Innocence Project corrected that omission and found Bennett's blood on the windshield on the passenger's side. None was found on the driver's side of the windshield. The Ohio Innocence Project also presented an affidavit from the first person to arrive at the scene, stating that Bennett was in the passenger's seat. Police had not bothered to gather evidence from those who arrived at the crash before the police did. The judge, hearing Bennett's motion to vacate, gave the cold shoulder to Godsey, but was friendly and warm with the prosecutors. He also appeared uninterested in Godsey's evidence, often taking phone calls for long stretches of time and reading briefs while the defense presented its case. The judge rejected Godsey's motion to exonerate Bennett. But once Godsey's team was in a higher court, away from the politics of the prosecutor's home field, the Ohio Innocence Project won Bennett's case and he was released from prison. I can't think of a better example of clearly this judge. Did we get the name of this judge? No, I don't think we did. I don't think we got the name of the judge, but you exactly the same as Angie. Let me just read that again. The judge, hearing Bennett's motion to vacate, gave a cold shoulder to Godsey, which is exactly what Angie has been doing so far with Kathleen, but was friendly and warm with the prosecutors. Well, yeah. But this was staggering. He also appeared uninterested in Godsey's evidence, taking phone calls for long stretches of time and reading briefs while the defense presented its case. Obviously, the judge rejected Godsey's motion to exonerate Bennett. But once the team were in the higher court, away from the politics of the prosecutor's home field, the Ohio Innocence Project won Bennett's case and he was released from prison. One pauses to wonder not only about the judge, but also the prosecutors. Given that zero of Bennett's DNA was found on the driver's windshield and that the affidavit of the first person on the scene stated that Bennett was in the passenger's seat, why would the prosecution not join Godsey's motion? As far as I know, I had only one innocent criminal client when I practiced law in Tennessee. A father charged with misdemeanor child abuse in 1978 because of a recent and truly horrible case of child abuse in a nearby county. My case caught the public's attention, even though it was only a misdemeanor prosecution. Without burdening the reader with details, the state failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. My best evidence of the state's failure: after a short period of jury deliberation, the jury foreman in open court asked the judge if they could indict the child's mother. The judge, of course, said no. Imagine my surprise when the jury, evidently persuaded that the mother was guilty, nonetheless convicted my client and imposed a mere 90-day sentence. I felt relatively confident that the judge would grant my motion for a new trial, given what he must have inferred about the jury deliberation. This would allow me to begin again with a new jury. He did not. Every time I saw him for months thereafter, he asked how my appeal was going. But we lost the appeal and were almost certain to lose, given the very low bar that the state had to pass at that time to demonstrate on appeal that the state had presented sufficient evidence. I have always thought the judge, an honourable man who I knew fairly well, knew the state's case was insufficient, but wanted to pass the buck to the Court of Appeals. Judges are elected in Tennessee. This does not approach the pro-state bias Godsey reports in his book, but is another piece of evidence, subtle though it is, that judges think about political consequences in criminal cases. Let's leave it there then at this section. We've got about a third of the way through, which is just about what I was hoping to do. Let's see who we've got. Dark Side, we've got Jazz, T1, Doctor. Hi there. Yes. It's quite interesting, this book, isn't it? You know, it's as you said, Doctor, it's one of these books that, you know, everybody should read, or you can get it as an Audible book on that. Let me get it up on my phone here. Sorry, on my picture. It's gone. Yes, you can get it as a Audible book read by B.J. Harrison. I would strongly recommend. Now then, Dark Side and David Coulford. Wow, what a character he was, eh? What a character. Yeah, absolutely bizarre. Let's get rid of that. So who have we got all here? Ronald, hi Ronald. Mark, hi Mark. I'll say T1 Jazz, Dr. Silkman, Kelly, hi Kelly, and I'm not missing anybody. Maybe I'm too fast, but no, I don't think I missed anybody up. So yeah, we'll look at part 2 probably tomorrow, and then the third part hopefully on Thursday. And in the meantime, got in touch with Big Dog, who wants to come on and have a chat with me, and I thought that he was in America, but he's not. He's down south in Englandshire, so hopefully we can get that arranged. He's keen to come on and talk. He's got some questions, as he's said himself, almost from a sort of a newbie point of view, somebody that's only just recently watched the documentary and has got certain questions, as most people do. Lots and lots of questions. So yeah, we'll look forward to that. Yet to get in touch with with Bose, although he's, he said he'd got stuff going on. So, I'll just wait for him to get in touch with me. But as I say, I've got an article that lists the Ken Kratz's 9 reasons why Steve is guilty. So we'll have a look at some of those on our regular Monday morning chats. Anyway, I'm going to go away and do some practice on my accordion, and probably make myself another coffee. And we'll see you all again soon. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.